So, all right. So, without further ado, let's take a look at today's round 6 tilt between myself and Timur Gareyev. So Timur has been having a very interesting event, shall we say. Started off pretty badly. He lost to who did he lose to in round 1? He lost his crazy game to Jeffrey in round 1, where it was very topsy-turvy. Then in round 2, he lost this completely drawn rook and pawn endgame against Wesley So, and then yesterday he won against A. Wonder Liang. So it's been a very, very up and down event for Timur, but going into this game, I knew that I had to try and do something because he is probably one of the weaker players in the field who I have not played against yet. Thank you, Azone Horse 1, for donating 500 bits. Thank you so much. Says thanks for this great breakdown. You're very welcome, Azone Horse 1. So all right. So his draw against Sevian was completely insane. That was just a crazy game as well. But yeah, so as I was starting to say, basically going into this game, he is one of the weaker players who I hadn't played yet. So he definitely was a big target, and I had the white pieces. So for that reason, I knew that I really needed to try and press for a win today. So in the game, I played knight f3 to start. Timur played c5. And here I thought for a while, I ended up playing g3. I wasn't sure what I should do here. So by playing c5, Timur is sort of inviting me to play e4 and go into a Sicilian, which was one of my thoughts. I could also play c4 or I could play g3. So basically, I had 3 choices here that I wasn't sure which one I should go for. After the game against Fabiano yesterday, after the game against Fabiano yesterday, I thought I could play e4. It would have been kind of an interesting choice to go into the Sicilian, but I decided that that after the game against Fabiano, probably Timur had looked at the game, probably had some idea, and I decided to play the move g3 instead. So here, Timur played g6. And here, after a very long think, I ended up playing c3. So in this position, you would think it's move 2. We should all be in theory. We should both be in theory. The game should be, we should blitz out another 10 moves. But I thought for a long time because I wasn't sure what I wanted. So there are many options. First of all, I can play c4, bishop g7. And I can play d4 here, takes knight d4. Like knight c6, knight c2 is one idea. That's one setup that I can go for. I can also play something like c4, bishop g7, bishop g2, e5, knight c3, knight c6, d3, d6. And this is sort of a Botvinnik setup. Black goes knight e7, bishop e6, probably knight d2, knight f1, knight e3, knight d5 makes the most sense here to fight for the d5 square. So this is another option. Whoa, thank you, Spraggy, for raiding with 959 viewers. Thank you so much for the raid, Spraggy. Wow. Hope the tables were treating you well tonight. And yes, it is pretty late in the UK. So hopefully you had some final tables and some nice cashes over on Poker Stars. So I had a couple options here. So you would think we're on move 3 in this game. Spraggy says chess time. Yes, it is indeed chess time. We're looking at my games from the U.S. Championship being played here in St. Louis, Missouri. We've played 6 rounds now, 6 rounds out of 11. Currently, I am the leader with, I believe I have 4 points. So I've won 2 games and I've drawn 4 games. So I have 6 points, or not 6 points. I have 4 points out of 6 games. So Shay Doc says at Spraggy, our boy is chip leading. I'm chip leading, but like I have like 25% of the chips in play. So it's nowhere near over yet. So in this game, so after g6, after thinking for a long time, I played c3 because there's so many setups. I can also play e4 and something like knight c6, d3, e6, c3, knight e7, castles, d5, knight d2. This is also another setup I can go for, sort of a close Sicilian setup with rook e1, e5. So there are many options I had here. I can play c3, c4. I can play d4, e4, bishop g2. But I used the psychological approach here because Timur is a very creative player. So Timur in general likes positions that are unbalanced. There's a lot of play. Things are not static whatsoever. And for that reason, I played the very peculiar looking 3c3 here. Timur played d5. I played bishop g2, knight f6. Now I played d4. So normally after takes, bishop g7, we're in what is it is the fianchetto Grunfeld. Normally it doesn't come from this order. So for those of you who are watching and wondering, c3, d4, this looks very weird. This would be a transposition. This would be a transposition. So to give you an example, normally it would go something like knight f6, knight f3, knight f6, d4, g6, g3, bishop g7, c4, let's just say c6, bishop g2, d5, takes, knight e5, or knight c3. This is sort of the standard fianchetto Grunfeld order that normally this position comes from, but in the game, as you'll notice, it's still the same thing. Thank you, Chesbay, for gifting a sub to Botez's chair. So after d4, black can trade and go bishop g7. And voila, we've reached the same position as here, although I think we've reached it one move. No, it's still the same. It's still move 6, but it's the exact same position, different order. So for that reason, that's why I played c3, because I felt that this position is, it's known to be a very solid line of the Grunfeld for black, but you can still play the position, and it's also very static. With the c-pawns being exchanged, the position is very symmetrical. All the pieces are placed exactly the same way. So for that reason, I thought I'll go for this, because probably Timur, he likes to play creative chess. He's not going to want to play something very boring and static like this, which is why I decided to play c3. Because I figured that for that reason, he'd do something different. And sure enough, Timur played knight bd7 here. Whoa, thank you, Mr. Crunchmunch, for gifting 5 subs to the community. Thank you so much, Mr. Crunchmunch, for the gifted subs. So Timur did play knight bd7 here. I played knight to e5. Idea that if black trades, I take on e5, I hit the knight on f6, and then I pick up this pawn on d5 because the knight can't defend it. It'll have to go away. Let's just say knight g8. Actually, knight g4 is a better move. Knight g4, but after takes, knight takes e5. I can probably play knight a3, idea knight b5, and knight c7 to fork the king and the rook. The bishop is stuck here because then you'll lose this pawn. And I also followed up with bishop f4 as well. So this position is very, very bad for black. So for that reason, Timur did not trade on e5. In fact, he could have taken on d4, but after cd4, this is also very, very good for white as well, because the knight is misplaced here. The knight belongs on c6, primarily because in this position, you can't develop this bishop. So the bishop is stuck behind the knight. You never want to exchange the knight here. Whereas if you compare this to the normal lines, let's say takes, knight c6, knight c3, bishop e7, knight e5, you can always just move the bishop to f5, or even e6, followed by rook c8. And you need this bishop to have squares on the diagonal, whereas when black plays knight bd7, if he trades, he closes the diagonal. You can't put a bishop on f5. You can't finish development putting the rook on c8 here. And to play b6 is possible, but very dubious as well. So for that reason, knight d7 is not correct. You really want the knight here, which is why taking would be bad. So Timur played queen b6. And here I played d takes c5. Again, I played this move after, I want to say, a 25-minute think, because I wasn't sure if I should play dc5 or I should play a4. Whoa, thank you, an anonymous gifter, for gifting 50 subs to the community. Wow, thank you, anonymous gifter. Wow, thank you so much. So someone says 25 minutes of thinking. Yeah, I know that sounds, for those of you who are coming from the poker, especially, like 25 minutes, like that is some serious time bank, or having like 100 of those time cards. If you were at the PC, what was it called? The PCP, the Poker Stars, or the Players Championship in the Bahamas. I think the players had some time cards they could use. But yeah, to think for 25 minutes is super, super long. But I thought for 25 minutes, because I really wasn't sure what I wanted to do. The reason I thought for so long is because I felt that this whole setup with knight d7 and queen b6 is wrong. Spraggy says the time cards that I tried to sell, no takers. Well, yeah, I know Spraggy tried to sell the time cards, but you're kind of super short stacked at that point. I think Spraggy had less than the I think you had less than the blinds, if I'm not mistaken, right? I was actually watching that part of it live. I think Spraggy tried to sell his time bait cards at the end when he had less than, I think his stack was less than the antes, I think. If I remember correctly, I think he had less. Yeah, he had less chips than the antes. So it was pretty funny actually to see that. Still, Spraggy still got it in good, though. I forget what he had. He had like 7-6 maybe against pocket fours, was it? I think he had two overs against the pocket pair in that hand, if I remember correctly, which was utterly hilarious to see him live on the flop, considering whoever it was with the pocket pair, I think, isolated it. So yeah, it was pretty ridiculous that he had 2 overs there. But unfortunately, he didn't hit. But nonetheless, he did cash, and I think he even leveled up like 2 levels from the min cash. So it was pretty good pretty good event for Spraggy. So all right, back to the chat. So 25 minutes is a long time to think. I thought for 25 minutes because if you think about the game, in this structure, if you don't do something right away, it's going to simplify. Thank you, Jeff Atchison, for subscribing with Twitch Prime. If you don't do something right away in this position, Black gets some harmonious development, Bishop G7, castles, maybe CD4, Knight E4 at some point. So let's just say I play normal moves. Castles, Bishop G7, so I can demonstrate, let's say, move like H3, takes, Knight E4. If Black can get this position here, I'm going to have to do something with the knights. The position is very static. You'll notice if you look at the pawn structure, we've got pawns on D4, D5, but none of our other pawns are really advanced, so you can't really use the pawns to change the pawn structure here. Thank you, Zerio Intensi, for subscribing with Twitch Prime. So because I can't use there's no like pawn breaks here in the structure, I'm going to have to exchange. And once I exchange with only these pawns out, Black will get to castle, and Black has no real worries here. So for that reason, I understood that even though it was very early on in the game, move 7, if I didn't try to do something, why H3? H3 was just an example. H3 was not a move I would have played. It was just an example of what could happen if I don't sort of force the issue right away. That's what it is. It's just to make an example, you guys. I would never play H3. It's just to make an example. Just to make an example for you guys to understand. It's not a move I would play. But the point is, I have to do something right away. And so in this position, there were really only 2 moves that I considered, or 3 moves. There's Knight takes D7, there's D takes C5, and there's A4. These are the 3 moves that I considered in this position. Gokul says Fabi would play H3 here. Ouch, that is I forgot about that. That's a nice one, nice zinger. But I played D takes C5 after a long thing. The reason that I didn't play A4 is because I thought that Black could take, and after A5, he could play, I believe it was Queen D6, Knight D7 takes CD4, Bishop G7, Knight C3, castles. And I thought after Rook C8, Queen to D3, Bishop C6, the Black should be okay here. So the reason that this is why I didn't go for this is because the Bishop is solid here, protects both pawns. I can't go E4 because the Bishop will then become active in controlling the E4 square here as well. And also, even if I go Bishop F4, Queen D7, it's kind of hard to create threats. I can probably play Rook D1 and still play for E4, Rook C1. But again, it's sort of a very static position. Not much is going on the C file. Pawns are symmetrical. Black can play Rook D8, E6. And I'm not really getting B4, B5. I don't have E4. So there are no pawn breaks. And in general, it should be about even, I think. I know the computer gives A4, A5 as being much better for white. I didn't look at the line super closely, but I was sort of unconvinced because I thought once the structure solidifies and we get this structure again, the Black should be okay here. So for that reason, I didn't play A4, which in retrospect was a mistake. I should have gone for A4, A5. Instead, I took on C5. Thank you, Amin Samani 99. For donating 1,500 bits. Thank you so much, Amin Samani 99. Thank you. So for that reason I took, because I thought after Queen C5, if I think about this not so much from the pure calculation standpoint, but from the standpoint of what are the possible advantages in the position for white, as well as how do I try to keep the game interesting, that DC5 is definitely better than letting the structure turn static like this on D4 and D5. So for that reason, that's why I thought if I take after Queen C5, pawn structure is imbalanced. We don't end up with, let's just say A4. We don't end up with this structure. And so by taking on C5, we're going to end up with an imbalanced structure. So even though Black may get the center, there are going to be more dynamic possibilities to create something that's complicated, as opposed to having a symmetrical structure with D4, D5. as well as having this open diagonal from G2 to A8. So for that reason, after queen takes C5, I played knight D3. Queen C7 was played. I also thought here with knight D3, like I'm hitting the queen. He's gone queen B6, queen C5. He's going to have to go queen C7. That's going to be 1, 2, 3 queen moves in the first 8 moves of the game. And as any beginner knows, Rick SMO with the comment of the day says, but wait, you did C3 in order to have a less dynamic game, didn't you? This is true, but this is why chess is a tricky game, because originally I did it to have something that was more static, but then I concluded that when we reached the position after queen B6, the best probabilities of the game becoming unclear where I would have winning chances where if I made it getting tongue-tied. The best chances were if I could play something where it was imbalanced again. So for that reason, I originally wanted something quiet because I figured he would do something dubious. But then when he actually did something dubious with knight bd7 and queen b6, I felt that my best chances to complicate the game and end up in a situation where the moves were not straightforward was to sort of make things messy again and go back into something that's complicated. So this actually is not about it's not really about pure calculations. This is more like sort of an aspect of trying to sort of play chess like poker. Try to think about it from a psychological standpoint of how do you in what structure and what positions are you going to have the most winning chances, really. So null value. I do have a proper microphone. Unfortunately, I'm not able to stream myself. I do have someone. One of the mods is doing me a big favor and doing the stream for me. So I do have a proper mic, but it's just a matter of the fact that here in St. Louis, the internet here at the hotel is just blah, very blah. So it's not me. So thank you, Stewie Griffin, for rating with a party of 30 as well. So that's why he took on C5, because I figured if you think about it logically, he's moved the queen 3 times in the first 8 moves. Like, you don't do that. That's like not bush league. That's like beginner level. You don't move your queen 3 times in the first 8 moves. However, in this case, it is okay for black because I've moved my knight to E5 back to D3. So I've also I've made 3 knight moves as well. So it does make sense. So TJP999 says, but you did move the knight 3 times. Exactly. Yeah. So here I played queen a4, really the only try, because I concluded that if I give black the center, so if I castle and black ever gets bishop g7 followed by e5, black should be better even, because the knight's not good. The pawn on c3, I'd like the knight to go to c3 to b5 or hit the pawn on d5. The pawn on c3 prevents that. So pretty much, Repa says, so pretty much just to make the game messy and bully players with superior tactics and positioning. Not always, but I mean, in general, if you think about chess as a basic equation, chess is a draw. So if your opponent plays perfectly, chess will be a draw. There is no doubt about that. If your opponent makes no mistakes, you will not be able to beat them, period. Flat out, full stop. So for that reason, when you use that logic, what you want to do is you want to create positions where the moves are not straightforward. There are multiple opportunities, and your opponent has chances to make mistakes. And I felt that if I played this line with a4 and we got this structure, this symmetrical structure with d4, d5, the moves for Timur as black would be a lot easier, and there would not be as many options or opportunities for him to make random moves or make moves that are not as precise. So that's why that's why I played this line with queen a4, bishop g7, and now bishop f4, hitting the queen again, developing a bishop. Now my bishops look very pretty on these diagonals as well. Black cannot play e5 here, or not e6. Black cannot play e5 because then I have bishop takes e5. Black cannot take the bishop because that would put the king in check. And so with this pin, black can't play e5 and grab the center with these pawns here. And for that reason, he has to go queen d8. Here, white castles, or I castled. Timur castled. I played knight to d2, trying to develop here. So in a perfect world, what I would like is I'd like knight d2, not rook c1, sorry. I'd like rook to d1, put pressure on the queen and the knight. I'd like to go rook to e1. I'd like to go e4, open this diagonal, use the queen, just tons of pressure on the d file and e file. In a perfect world, if I can get all these moves in, then it's completely winning. So for that reason, I played knight d2 because it also supports the e4 pawn break to activate this g2 bishop on this long diagonal. Here, Timur played knight to b6. Here, I played queen to b3. Also, logical move, put pressure on the pawn on d5. Also, a4, a5, put pressure on the knight, and then try to win this pawn on d5 here. So here, Timur played bishop to g4, attacking the pawn. I played rook to e1. And Timur played queen to c8, a very good move, actually. Queen c8 was a very nice move. I actually, at this point, was starting to feel very confident about my position. And as soon as he played queen c8, I realized that, well, it looks very nice for white. It's not easy at all. And the reason it's not easy here is because queen c8 does two things. First of all, black can play bishop h3. Whereas if black plays rook c8, then I play h3, hit the bishop. If he goes bishop f5, I can play g4, trade ed3, and this position is probably okay for black, but white is for choice with the two bishops here on these diagonals still. Also, black doesn't get e5 in a big center. I can play d4 to contend for e5. I can also still play a4, a5 to try and win the pawn on b7, and I also have the open e-file. So if I can get this, then it's really, really nice for white. So if I can get this h3, it's very important. But queen c8 prevents h3, first of all, and it also protects b7, and it supports knight to c4 here. So if I played something like a4, knight c4, I can't trade because then black takes, and he hits the queen and the knight, and the queen protects c4, and the queen protects b7 here. So for that reason, queen c8 is a very, very nice move, one that I completely overlooked because, like I said, I was expecting something like rook c8, and then after h3, I thought that I would be quite a bit better. So queen c8 was a very good move, and it was very annoying when Timur played this because I realized that all my ideas with h3 and a4 kind of don't work as well. So here I played queen to b4, hitting the pawn on e7, also still trying to play for a4, a5, and you'll notice the black plays something like e6, a4. Knight c4 loses all of its punch because I trade, and now the queen's on b4, not b3, so you're only attacking the knight. And then I can go knight e5 and then take the pawn on b7 next move, and this is completely winning for white. So for that reason, queen b4 is logical because it hits the pawn, spies the bishop on g4, still keeps a4, a5 intact, and meanwhile, knight c4 loses all of its potency here. So after queen b4, Timur played rook to e8 to protect the pawn. Also, long-term, try to play for e5 to hit the bishop if he can, and also he can maybe go bishop f8 to put a discovery on my queen on b4 as well. So here I played a4. Idea to play a5, just following through, put more pressure on the pawn since the knight defends it. Maybe play for c4. So black, let's just say black plays a random move like h6 here. I can maybe play a5, knight d7, and maybe, well, c4 I guess runs into e5, but I can still just play knight e5 here. And after knight d7, knight e5, not only does he not get this idea with e5, I'm also threatening c4 to blast open the diagonal again. The queen's bad. The rooks aren't really doing a whole lot here. And I'm also maybe going to take the bishop on g4. So this is really, really good for white. So for that reason, Timur played knight d7. So now a5 is not a threat. Black also now threatens e5 himself because the knight and the rook protect the e5 square. So here I played knight to e5. Very important move. Again, if I try c4 after e5, black is just much better here. A Cash Money 93 says, Hikaru, how did you recognize the critical moments in the game? Well, it's pretty much every move, I would say, from about move, let's just say, I would say every move from move 7 to about move 16 was super critical, I want to say. So, yeah, up until this point, every move was super critical, because if one side makes a big mistake, you're going to give the other side a big advantage. Thank you, Explorer I, for subscribing with a tier 1 sub, 3 months, baby. Thank you, Explorer I. So yeah, so up to this point, once I got knight e5 in, I felt that I should be doing okay. But every move is critical, because if I give e5, black's going to be better. If a5 works and I win this pawn, or I get c4, then I'm just going to be winning. So every single move was super, super critical from about move 7 until I want to say move 18. So after knight e7, knight e5, Timur played a5 to hit my queen. I played queen b5, and now he took on e5. Every move was critical, which is why I think by this point, we had both used maybe close to an hour on the clock, I think, for the first 18 moves, because every single move was super, super critical. So here Timur made the mistake. He took on e5. And after this move, I felt that I would find some way to win the game, pretty much. Pete99 says, Hikaru, do you ever do fist pumps in chess or come on style shouts? You cannot do it. You're supposed to be quiet during the games, but I will not pretend to say that I've gotten up from the board and walked around and like fist pumped or under my breath shouting, like come on, like Roger style or something. But you don't do it. You don't do it out loud. But I have done both of those things privately when I've gone up from the board and started walking. Bruce Lewis says Roger style. Yes, of course, Roger style, like Roger, like the GOAT, Roger Federer, of course, the one and only. That's you. Sometimes you have to do that. Tiger, I don't recall Tiger ever saying "come on." Tiger's done the fist pump like that like a million times. When he like chips in or something. But thank you, Kitty Hisses, for subscribing with Twitch Prime. Tiger, I don't feel like I've heard Tiger say "come on." I've seen Tiger do the fist pump 5 million times, but I don't think I've seen Tiger do the shout "come on" like Roger. Djokovic is not the greatest. Come on, let's be serious. Djokovic is not the greatest. Not even close. Give me a break. I do not roll my eyes like the Undertaker. So A5. No, Rafa doesn't say "come on." Doesn't he say "vamos, vamos, vamonos"? Anyway, Jimmy Connors, of course, another great tennis player. He did the fist pump too. There was that match from the U.S. Open, the classic one with like 20 overheads in a row where he hit the running forehand, I think, down the line, which was pretty classic, where he does the crazy fist pump. But yeah, all right, you guys. So Shlava says, "What is this tennis chat?" Yes, Leighton Hewitt also did it. Everyone did it. But anyway, all right, you guys. So back to the chess. All right. So I played knight e5. Timur played a5, queen b5, and here Timur made the mistake. He took on e5, and after this, at the time, even during the game, once I took on e5, I sort of felt that things were starting to turn. I would find a way to win after this. John McEnroe was the best U.S. tennis player of all time. No, I think Pete Sampras was, and then probably Andre Agassi after that. That would be my ranking. But yeah, I mean, maybe what I'll do is if it's the last round or something and someone makes a blunder, it's the end of the game. I'll shout. It's like, "Are you serious? Are you serious?" Maybe I'll shout that at the end of the game if someone hangs a piece. But in general, yeah. So after bishop e5, I felt that at this point things were really, really good here. So all right. So a5 was played queen b5, knight e5. I felt this was a mistake. I thought that Timur here probably should have tried bishop e6. Protect the pawn. If I take, he can take with the bishop. And it's very subtle. But if I trade here after bishop e7, queen b3, black can then play e5, or bishop c6 followed by e5. And the problem is that in the game, after black trades, the bishop on e5 is really strong. The knight can never really move because I exchange the bishops. Bishop also prevents black from playing e5 here. And so for that reason, this was a big, big mistake by Timur to trade here. So after bishop takes e5, Timur played bishop to d7. Now I played queen d3. Here he played bishop to c6. And here I played queen d4. And the reason this is so bad for black is that now I've got this very big clamp on the center here. This queen on d4 and bishop on e5 prevent the knight from moving. Like black would love to go knight d7 and e5, but he can't do that because the bishop will hang on g7 here. And for that reason, it's very hard for black to play around this because he doesn't really have anything going on the queen side. He has to defend the pawn on d5. And it's really not clear what you can do. If you ever move your bishop, I will trade, and then I move my knight. Thank you, Electric Masada, for subscribing to the Tier 1 sub. And here the pawn on d5 is super loose. Now you have double f pawn, so you can't put the pawn on e6 from e7 to defend it anymore. So for that reason, it's very hard to play here. So here Timur played queen f5, another bad move because now I go knight f1. And now things really start to get bad because now I have knight e3 hitting the pawn, hitting the queen. He still can't do anything with this bishop and this knight. JBob42 says better athlete, Shooter McGavin or Ernie McCracken. Shooter McGavin is isn't he he's the antagonist in Happy Gilmore, I think, right? Isn't he the golfer? And he's the bad guy in Happy Gilmore, I think. But anyway, so here I played knight f1. Timur played rook a d8. Probably at this point, this is the last spot where Timur had a chance to maybe try and salvage something. He could have played bishop h6, removing the bishop from g7. Now he wants to go knight e7, hit the bishop on e5, and then play for e5. And after bishop f6, he should take with the queen. We trade. I go e3. And at this point, white is quite a bit better. Again, you've got this permanent weakness on d5. The pawns sort of prevent the pawn from ever going forward. I can put a knight on d4 as well. So this should be pretty bad for black. After rook d1, maybe bishop f8, knight d2, bishop c5. But after knight b3, bishop b6, knight d4, black is going to be suffering for a long time here because this pawn on d5 is really, really ugly. He can't get rid of the weakness. I can maybe at some point double up, play b3, knight e2, knight f4, and try to win the pawn that way as well. So this should be pretty bad for black, but maybe black can hold this somehow. But I felt that at this point, bishop h6 was the last moment where Timur maybe could have found, he could have tried to play on and suffer without simply being lost, because in the game it gets really bad really, really fast here, because Timur played rook a d8. Now I played b4. Another critical move here, I could have played knight e3 first, queen c8, and then b4, but I felt like after knight e3, queen c8, b4, maybe he could, no, bishop h6, maybe it doesn't matter. Maybe I can just go knight e3 right away and it doesn't matter. I don't remember why I played b4 first instead of knight e3, but they both are good, so I played b4. The point behind b4 here is now I also threaten to go b5 and remove this bishop. This bishop is so nice here on c6, but if I can remove the bishop, then knight e3 hitting the queen and the pawn is going to be deadly here, because the bishop will have to go to d7, which then blocks the rook from defending the pawn as well. So b4 is pretty strong here. So here Timur played queen c8. Now I played knight to e3, hitting the pawn again, just trying to wait and play b5 here. I also want black to trade, so if he trades, then he opens up the c file for my rook as well, and b5, a5, a6 is coming, and this is just positionally completely lost for black. So Timur played b6 here, protects the pawn on a5. Also, I can't take, because if I take, black goes knight d7 here, hitting the queen and hitting the bishop, and I'm going to lose material. So, of course, I didn't do that. I played rook e d1, put more pressure on the pawn on d5. So now if black ever tries knight h5, I trade, and I can just take b6 here. Now d5 is also hanging, a5 is hanging, and this is just game over pretty much. So for that reason, Timur played bishop to a8 here. Now I played b5. b5 maybe isn't necessary. Maybe I could have played rook c1 as well. Hard to judge, but I thought b5 made sense because I fixed the weakness on b6 here permanently. His bishop is stuck behind this wall of pawns, and now d5 is a permanent weakness. And if I can ever play c4 at the worst, I can maybe get knight c4 and win an endgame, because the pawn on b6 will be weak here. So for that reason, I played b5 just to lock it in. Timur played h5. Very, very close to desperation here. I'm just basically, I want to get rook c1 and take. So if you go back to the start here, I would like to play something like takes, queen b6, but it's no good because I hang c3, hitting both rooks. So for that reason, it makes sense. Just put the rook on d1. Now there's only the rook on a1 hanging if I ever exchange and take the pawn. And now after h5, I play rook c1. Same idea. Now I just want to take, and now I've got the rooks on c1 and d1, so bishop c3 will not be a threat. And it's worth noting here, black can't really bail out. So if black tries bishop h6 here, I take on f6, e takes f6, I've got the very nice move knight to g4, which hits both the pawn and the bishop, and then I'll take the pawn on b6 or the pawn on f6. This d5 pawn is still a weakness. This bishop is stuck behind the pawn, so it's a permanent something on e8. I don't know what you call it, but it's a bad piece. With that draw, I stayed tied for the lead at +1. So for that reason, bishop h6 isn't logical. Bishop f8, I do the same thing. I take and I go knight g4, threatening knight f6, and it's just game over. Why not knight f6, h5? Well, the problem is Timur really only had one chance to play it. So maybe here he could have tried knight h5 right away. this was the one point I think maybe he could have tried it, because after knight f1, if knight h5, I trade and I go knight e3, and I'm just going to pick up the pawn on d5 next move. F-Metro 96, yes, I did not change the microphone. I'm in St. Louis. There are issues with my internet. So once I'm back home in Florida, it'll be back to the same old. But I'm in St. Louis right now, and the internet is just, there are issues with the internet. So that's why there are issues with the sound. That's why I'm not actually doing the stream myself. What to do? That's life. So, all right. So knight h5 was possible there. But otherwise, after b4, if knight h5, again, you have the same problem. I take and play knight e3. Queen moves somewhere, c8, I go b5, knight e6, queen b6, bishop d7, and again, I just win the pawn on d5. So really, I mean, there's no point, and even here, knight h5 is the same thing. I can trade and go b5, e5, and queen h4. Again, this bishop is undermined. If bishop d7, just knight d5. If d4, I can even just take and maybe takes. Maybe just knight g4 is good enough, knight f6, knight h6 ideas, and this should be winning for white. So really, black just never has the opportunity to ever play knight h5 after he doesn't do it the first time. So here, right, so b6, rook d1, bishop a8, b5. Here, Timur played h5, sort of the last gasp. I played rook c1. So now everything is where I want. The rooks are on c1, d1, c4 is possible. But mainly the idea is if black let's just throw in a random move, takes queen b6. Now bishop c3 isn't really a threat. My rooks are ideal, d5 is weak, and this is completely winning. So black can't, so now I'm fully ready to take all these queenside pawns and just mop up the board. So here, Timur played bishop f8, logical move, because now after takes, I no longer have knight g4, the pawn on h5 prevents that, but it's still too little too late, so I played queen takes b6. Timur played rook e6 here, which pretty much just sort of is pretty much akin to a resignation. He probably should have played bishop to c5, but after queen a5, it's still pretty close to losing. Ibshi says, why is FM Jennifer Yu so strong and GM Irina Crush so weak at the Women's Championship? Well, Irina's not weak, but Irina simply doesn't play that much chess seriously anymore. So I think she's rusty and out of form. Whereas Jennifer, I think, did Jennifer get a gold medal or a silver medal in the Olympiad? She did something really, really good on board 3, I believe it was. So yeah, and yeah, I mean, Jennifer is just young. Irina, I think, is mainly a coach these days, so that's why. So back to the game. Bishop c5 is a better move, but after queen takes a5, it's still probably losing. Black can trade with the bishop, but if you trade with the bishop after rook e3, I just go c4. You can't take or push d4 because I'll just trade. So for example, dc4 hangs rook d8. The queen protects the rook on d8. If you play d4, I can just trade, and let's just start the march of the pawns. c5. These babies on c5 and b5 are just going all the way up the board. You're gonna have some queens coming on here. So I mean, 3 connected pass pawns is just way too much. Black can't stop all the pawns here. So why did he have to give up the b6 pawn? Why not just queen e6 instead of bishop f8? Queen e6 is playable, but actually that runs into now c4 here. So queen e6, I play c4, and now you have the problem. If you take, I sack my queen on d8. Rook d8, I take, king h7, and I just take the bishop. Or the knight, sorry, and if you take, I just take, and I've got 2 rooks and a minor piece for the queen. So you basically, the problem is now you have issues on the d file too. So like you have issues everywhere here. Like everything is just collapsing. I'm threatening to take. I mean, everything is just collapsing here for black. So for that reason, yeah, queen e6, c4 is just crushing for white as well. So that's the main issue here. Like everything is just misplaced for black, and everything is just perfect for white here. So this is just completely winning for white. Tree Poker says, I feel like black needs to make sure he never runs into this d5 weakness in the middle game. Yes, but of course it's very easy to see in retrospect much later on. It's not so easy. Like all the problems occur because I get this sort of mini battery on d4 and e5 with this queen and this bishop, because it stunts all the ideas for black. No e5, even e6 you can't play because then you hang the knight. Like it just this queen and this bishop just it stunts all of black's Black's play here. So it's very easy in retrospect to see, but at the time, it's not so obvious. But yeah, this queen and this bishop are just crushing for white here. So the other line that I was going to mention, so queen e6 c4 is just game over. Was this one so takes, bishop c5, queen a5. So trade on e5 was a critical point, more or less. Like I said, I felt during the game that when Timur traded and let me get this bishop on e5 and this queen on d4, that basically it was probably okay. There were still ways to defend as black, but it was going to always be difficult, and all the danger is gone for white. So white's moves are going to be natural and easy. Black's one is going to have to find very precise moves, use a lot of time, and in general, it's going to be very hard to defend. So, all right, so back to the game. The other line I was going to mention here was not queen e6. So bishop f8 takes queen b6. Bishop c5 takes. So I already mentioned bishop e3 and just c4 and the three pawns. You're just going to see the march of all the pawns up the board. Everything's just terrible for black. The other way black can play is rook takes e3, f e3, bishop takes e3, king h1. If black plays h4, for example, I think there are a couple ways to win, but I think white can even maybe just take on h4 here, and it should just be winning. If black takes on c1, I can take rook to e8, and now here I think I can play c4. If black takes on c4, we trade into the endgame again, and this one is also completely hopeless for black. White's only up a pawn, but two of black's pawns are doubled, and I just go rook b4, and again, we're going to get the march of the A and B pawns. The rook is going to escort them up the board, and it's completely winning for white. If black plays rook takes e2, I think white can play c5 here, and I'm just going to go c6. Black can't play d4 because you hang the bishop. If black takes and goes d4, I just play c6, shut down the bishop permanently, and bring my queen back. And so I think after c5 just is game over. Even h4, c6 is probably winning because this bishop is forever finished. It's completely dead on a8 here. And even this, I think, is winning. So I don't know. Maybe there's a way to be more precise. But I know during the game I just saw I was going to get the pawn to c6 and shut this bishop out forever. And I knew that it had to be technically winning. So I wasn't that concerned about this. Someone mentioned... they mentioned rook d7 here to play rook a7, trying to trap the queen because the bishop covers all the other squares. But I think after rook a7, there are a couple things. First of all, I think I can play c4, create squares for my queen. Again, if black can't really take, because I can just play queen a8, same basic variation, and this is really bad. If black plays d4, I think I can even go knight d5 here. Rook a7, I can always just move the queen. If black trades, I think this is actually not so different from the game. Very much the same thing, except the rook's on d7 instead of e8. And again, c5, c6 is coming, and this bishop is just terrible behind this pawn. So all of this, I think, is completely winning. And I don't really see anything else that makes sense. But basically, yeah, black just gets this bishop behind this pawn, and this bishop on a8 is just terrible. And I will say that when I did play this b5 move, I sort of envisioned something like this, where my bishop would be much better than his bishop, and long-term, this would be winning. So for that reason, Timur decided to just play rook e6. He just didn't want to. He didn't want to go cool. Yes, I did analyze the game against Fabiano earlier in the stream. That was the first game that I analyzed tonight. So here, he played rook e6, and I don't blame Timur. He didn't want to go for anything where you have to suffer and probably just be completely lost. Why waste extra hours of your life? You don't have to. So, Bruce Lewis, my game against Fabiano ended in a draw. So here, Timur played bishop c5, played knight takes d5. He played rook d to e8. Now here, if black trades on d5, this is also losing. I go bishop takes d5. If he plays rook takes e2, trying to win this pawn on f2 and open up the king, I can just play queen takes d8 check, hitting the king, queen d8, and now I've got bishop takes f7 check, discovery, and after king f7, I just pick up the queen. Whoa! Thank you, Son of Anne, for gifting 20 more subs to the community. Thank you so much, Son of Anne. Thank you. Wow. Thank you so much, Son of Anne, for the 40 gifted subs to the community tonight. Thank you so much, Son of Anne. Thank you. Thank you so much. Wow. Really, really appreciate it. Glad that you're enjoying the stream so much. Wow, thank you. So Yeah, so as I was saying, so this whole line with bishop d5 and rook e2 is no good. If black tries something like bishop d5 takes and maybe bishop f2, this also doesn't work here. King takes f2, queen c5 check, trying to pick up the bishop, but I can just play king f1, and after rook takes d5, there's a very unpleasant queen e8 check, and I pick up the rook on d5 now. So king g7, I just go queen takes d5, and just up a clean rook, bunch of pawns, king is completely safe. So it's all good. Alleviation, Anne's son meets Stacy's mom. Touche, good song, good song. That's a good song from the 90s, glory days. Thank you, BD149159, for subscribing with Twitch Prime. Yeah, bishop takes d5. If you don't have rook e2 or bishop f2, it's losing. He played rook d8. Now, once I get e3 and I just clog this diagonal down, white is up uno, dos, tres pawns. So white is up. Thank you, Guideem, for subscribing with Twitch Prime. Thank you so much for the sub, Guideem. Hope you are enjoying your life in Denver after moving from St. Louis, Missouri. Uno, dos, tres, cuatro, cinco, seis. Yeah, so e3, Timur played king g7, and now after queen c7, he resigned. I have other ways to win. Knight c7 probably wins, forking the two rooks. But at this point, I'm up 3 pawns. Tres pedones, I think. I think that's pawns, right? Pedone? Maybe I'm wrong. I think that's pedone. So king g7. Knight c7 probably wins. I think knight f4 wins as well. Bishop h3 probably wins. Everything wins here for white, but I thought, I'm up 3 pawns. Let's just not allow any nonsense, because I know that if queens come off the board, then it's completely winning for white. Oh, pedone. Oh, I'm confusing my languages. That's Italian. That's not Spanish. My bad. So, lo siento. It's peon. Okay. So queen c7 is what I played just to checkmate the black queen. And once queens come off the board, I'm going to be up 3 pawns, and it's completely winning for white. So for that reason, in this position, Timur resigned because once the queens come off, it's just game over. So Bruce Lewis, yes, it is. Yeah, I checkmated Timur's queen. I checkmated his queen in this game. So once I checkmated his queen and queens come off, I'm just up 3 pawns. And there's no reason to even play on here, just because I'm just going to roll these bad boys all the way up the board and make 3 queens on c8, b8, and a8 eventually. So that's why Timur resigned here. So so Timur resigned the game, which put me on 4 points out of 6, plus 2 in the event, 2 wins, 4 draws, and at the moment I am currently leading